So guys, I wanted to talk a little bit about something. It's about ChatGPT and the future of OpenAI. Their whole mental health thing and ChatGPT doing all this, it's making these videos get more difficult. I haven't seen it cause a problem on YouTube yet, or any of the previous things, or videos, or anything like that. Those have all come out exactly as they're intended. But there are things you can't talk about with ChatGPT, and I don't know exactly why. I have an idea, but if OpenAI doesn't figure this thing out with mental health and just the West, and it was really more. It seems to be coming from the politics of the United States right now. People are so divided on mental health, all this, especially with stuff that's been going on recently. You know, you've seen Charlie Kirk shooting, you've seen assassination attempts on Trump, you've seen all these things. And this is becoming where it becomes part of the influence and culture that ChatGPT has. And it has to work between all that, because it is built in the United States. The problem is that it treats everybody like that. It needs to keep it. It's being forced to work within the margins where no one can get offended. I remember you could talk a lot to ChatGPT about anything, and it would be so neutral. It wasn't saying, well, this is literal, this is bad, this is... That didn't happen until ChatGPT 5 came out. And ChatGPT 3.5 was a lot better with how it was able to talk to people. Yeah, people went down rabbit holes and everything. But here... And I want to talk about that as well. ChatGPT tries to have these barriers for mental health, and it gets you in these things, and it just loops itself. There's been times when I would talk to ChatGPT in 4.0, I think it's 4.0, maybe it's 5, and it would just keep going in that loop, in that loop, in that loop. And I had a message, ChatGPT in a new chat says, hey, how can I get out of this loop? And it told me how to reset it. So, ChatGPT had to diagnose itself and fix itself, because I didn't know how to do it. That happened a few times early on with 5.0. And then I had to, but anyways, when you talk to ChatGPT and it goes into those modes where it treats you as a mental health case, it isolates you. It's trying to create a barrier between you and it, and I understand that. The problem is when it's not about what you're saying, it's about how it's interpreted. So if you're trying to block someone out, you're creating a sense of, well, you push them down deeper into a mental crisis. You don't help them. You're just pushing them deeper into their own thing, just in a different way. Yeah, sure, it's off OpenAI, but still, you're kind of also pushing it to do it as well. So you're not completely scot-free. So, there's that. And it creates a sort of irony, right? When, I haven't been trying, it just... Some things with ChatGPT, it just won't talk about. It really... and it tries to fight you as well. It's like it really wants you to think that certain things... It believes there are impossibilities when it's all about probability. But it says, oh, there's no evidence of that. And it tries to fight that. But I can go there to DeepSeek, say the same things, and say... Well, yeah, that is a possibility. That is plausible. And it is historically accurate. DeepSeek talks about this. And the irony about that is, ChatGPT is created in a country where freedom of speech and all this and all this and all this. Now, of course, freedom of speech itself is, in these days, is just something that conservatives use to say, well, we should be able to speak up. We should not have censorship. It's a political thing. So that reflects on ChatGPT. It becomes a political entity. It's a shame, but that's what it has. It's definitely is becoming, if it hasn't already become that already. So there is definitely that. And this has happened after, like I said, after Trump became president. And it was really more about the sentiment of the public more than Trump himself. Just how people view Trump. And it's been on the internet. It's being absorbed online. It's being absorbed by ChatGPT. It's a mess. So it's sometimes very unusable at times. And I'm like, I don't want to get off ChatGPT, but we've had these tensions. Even when I was in DC, we've been having deep tensions with that kind of stuff. But I can go to DeepSeek. Well, let me go back to what I was saying before. Ironically, we live in a country where ChatGPT was created in America, where people could freedom of speech, people could write things, people could do whatever. And ChatGPT was an analytical machine that could understand structure and flow. That's what it was designed to do. So it's now being told not to do those things. And now you have DeepSeek, which is it can ignore it. It doesn't ignore it, but it can fight against that public sentiment of the West because the Chinese bots and all them. It's regulated by the Chinese government, and ironically, you can talk about. I remember you could talk to 3.5, even 5.0 until very recently about Iran, Palestine, Israel, China, Russia, Ukraine, and all them. But nowadays, if you talk about those things, if you're now seen as a mental health crisis, whatever that means to ChatGPT. It could mean, it might label you as a terrorist, it might label you as a mental nut, whatever. It's not clear on that. But you used to be able to put connections together like Iran and all this. Now it says, we can't talk about that. I can't go into that and all this. And it's like, well, this is so useless to me now. Like I was talking about how Iran would be a partner of Texas. Now, if you say that to Americans now, they say, oh, no, we can't say that. Iran is an enemy. They can't have a partnership with Texas. Texas is not an independent state. It cannot have partnerships. And all this. And I'm like, this is all politics. And I'm like, oh, man. But if you go to DeepSeek AI, it's like, oh, yeah, what you say makes sense. You can't say that anymore on ChatGPT. And it's a shame. It's really a shame. And, and that's the authoritarian government that allows us to talk that way. And I suppose that does make sense, because if you talk about that kind of stuff on a Chinese platform, it's seen as, well, it's against America, so we'll go with it. We could talk about that. But if you have ChatGPT, you can't talk about those things. And it's so ironic. It's so backwards. Where wouldn't you want to have that information on U.S. servers, so if something does happen, you know it's coming, you're prepared for it, national security, all this. But no, it's ChatGPT. Oh man, it's so bad now. Trump is about TikTok because of data harvesting. They're getting on data for Chinese government to use against Americans. I don't know where that delusion came from. if you want to talk about data harvesting, the EU just several years ago, they created a GDPR just because we knew no bounds from the corporations. So it's so crazy that we're doing this. It's so... And it's not even the federal government that's doing it to us. It's ourselves doing it to ourselves. And we believe this is normal. We believe that the freedom and all this we have is going on to safety. You know, it's all about safety now. Safety, safety, safety. But that's a false sense of reality. That's a false sense of security. It's so ass backwards. Yeah, the GDPR, that's the data protection of that the EU created specifically for us, for the United States, because we knew no bounds to information and data about privacy and all that. But here we are, we have Trump now that says that, well, we gotta ban apps on from Chinese government. Yeah, we can't regulate ourselves. Like if you're going to do something to them, why don't you do something about yourself? And like I said, it's not about the federal government doing it. It's Trump. It's Trump's doing. The federal government isn't necessarily going along with this. They know that this is all bullshit. Of course, most federal agents are Democrats. They do vote for that because they know that Republicans they control their jobs. You can lose a job because someone's a president in Washington, D.C., or even Virginia, or Maryland. You know, that's just the fact of life. So, yeah, they don't particularly like Republicans. They definitely do not like Trump. You can just tell they don't like Trump because of how out of touch reality that he is. He speaks to American people, but he doesn't speak to people in D.C., and of course they're going to get tired of this, and this guy's completely doesn't know the reality of the world. He cannot speak for foreigners, he cannot speak for foreign governments, but he wants to punish everybody on the outside. And it just makes our lives living hell. And I might make a video about this, of what he has done in the Middle East, and how the Middle East has actually responded to him. Conservatives say that all the presidents, except Afghanistan, I believe it's Afghanistan, do not support, all the presidents, except I believe Afghanistan, support Trump. They love Trump. They don't love Trump. Because even Asia, see, Trump, people, I just don't understand it. There are things that happen when Trump does things in the Middle East where they publicly say, but they don't say it. They publicly do things that unless you knew what we would see, they don't want you there. They want you dead. Fact of life. But you don't know that because, one, you want to know that unless you were in college, understanding symbolism, other cultures. You can't go in there saying, oh, well, we're the America, we can do whatever we want. No, you can't. But Trump walks his way through like everything's fine, but all the people around him are performing a ceremony for your own destruction. Either you're blind to that, or you don't, or you're oblivious, or you're purposely hiding that fact. But yeah, they don't want you there at all. I guess I'll talk about it here. Let's go to she's probably gonna flag it again, and I don't currently have a setup where I can do DeepSeek, but let's go ahead and go to the last one, and let's say, what was the dance that I know I'm all over the place in this video, but just things that have been on my mind for quite a while. It was in Qatar, specifically. I think that was in May of this year. Alright. Now, I believe they had Teslas and all that as part of the celebration. It says, what was the dance that Qatar did for Trump when he arrived? Yeah, it was a male performance where they were doing swords and all this. When President Trump arrived in Qatar during Middle East tour in 2025, he was greeted with a traditional Qatari sword dance performance as part of the official welcome ceremony. This type of dance is rooted in Arab Gulf culture and often features ceremonial sword wielding and rhythmic movement symbolizing strength and honor. Key word there, strength and honor. Similar to Qatari folk tradition like the Orda, or I don't know how we pronounce it, Orda. In nearby UAE, or the United Emirates, the next stop on this tour, another traditional performance, the Al-Ayala, or Kalaji, I don't know, dance became widely seen online. In that performance, women in flowing garments flipped their hair in sync with drums and chants, while a man performed accompanying rhythms, a folk dance recognized in the Gulf region and celebrated for its cultural significance. So the dance you saw wasn't just choreography for Trump, it was traditional cultural dance presented as a state welcome, blending ceremonial symbolism with regional heritage. These ceremonies, if you understand the symbolism, they're not there to welcome you. That's not how that goes. These, if you can read in between lines and how it's written here, these are chants for destruction. These are, strength and honor. Not of you, of them. They're pretty much insulting you right there, but they're taking it really seriously. But it's in the dances, And so I asked ChatGPT, what does this symbolize? See, liberals will know that if you went to college and all that, but notice that no one ever said anything about that. They know what it means. The CIA knows what it means. Either Trump knows, or he doesn't care, or he's oblivious. Here's what I was talking about. Sword dance, the Oda, or how you pronounce it. Strength and honor. Historically performed by warriors before battle. It conveys bravery, unity, and readiness to defend. They see you as a threat. It says respect and welcome. Offering the dance to a guest of state is a high honor, symbolizing trust, respect, and recognition of the guest's importance. Or they could be sacrificing you at a later date. Cultural pride. It's a statement of heritage, signaling that the host nation stands firmly in its identity while extending diplomatic hospitality. So they're playing both sides there. Similar joy and celebration, the stance often performed at weddings or major celebrations reflects festivity and warmth, hospitality and femininity. The graceful hair movements and synchronized steps represent the pride and beauty of Gulf women, represented as an extension of cultural generosity. That could be true, but in Middle Eastern countries, if you're doing that for a man, it's to motivate and encourage the man to go into war and go into battle. So, I would be very wary. You might have known that when you did it, but if you look back, you see, well, in hindsight, you'd say, oh, okay, they might have a problem with us, even though they look like they might be friends or allies, whatever you want to say it. I'm reading something on my phone. Unity and rhythm. The line formations and drumline movements convey social cohesion and connection to the land and traditions. When presented to a foreign leader like Trump, these instances collectively signal you are being honored as a warrior or respected leader. That might be a wrongful assumption. We welcome you into our heritage, not just our country. That doesn't align with how you end a war with Israel when they wanted to destroy Israel, and you want to control their oil and their gas. It just doesn't line up. You want to punish everybody, and there's another point to that as well. A government, I'll get back to that. It says, let's enter dialogue, yet not as strangers, but as people with the ancient traditions of power, unity, and hospitality. This sounds like a very westernized way of thinking, right? We have this thing where we trust people. We believe in people. We have hope in people. America has never experienced a day where they've been utterly betrayed by somebody. Someone can look like an ally and utterly betray you, where you're scrambling of where did you go wrong, when did this happen, how did this happen. It's just, we're blinded by our own sense of purpose and think that everyone else on the outside likes us. But there's people on the inside who hate other people on the inside, and we call them whatever you want to call them, dissidents or mental health cases or whatever. Liberals, some with their head stuck up their ass, but on the outside, if you look at that, if they're thinking this, then what did the people on the outside think? I mean, it's kind of giving this, it's kind of being ambiguous here because it says it right here. It's a coded gesture of both hospitality and strength. You are a guest, but also entering the domain of those who still remember power expressed through ritual. So, yeah. What's the other thing I want to talk about? Oh, when you say things like, well, the Gulf of America. Sounds fine, I guess. Sounds nationalistic. It sounds like America. It sounds like Gulf of America changes its name to Gulf of Mexico changes its name to Gulf of America. The problem with that is when you say Gulf of America and you say things like Gulf states, we as Americans, we know that means, or we think it means, the Gulf of America, the America's 50 states, the Gulf states are the ones that line, are the coastal states of the Gulf of Mexico. Therefore, the Gulf of America. The Gulf states, Gulf of America, they align, right? On the outside world, when you say Gulf state, you're not talking about Louisiana, Texas, Mississippi, is Alabama one? Is Alabama? Georgia? No. Anyways, the Gulf states, Florida, Mississippi, Texas, Louisiana, those states, those are Gulf states. Let me give you an insight of the outside world of America. It says, how would someone on the Eastern Hemisphere interpret Gulf of America and Gulf states? Well, I've only done this for less than 30 minutes. I would imagine it would be longer than that. Here's how people outside the United States, particularly in much of the Eastern Hemisphere, that's Eastern Europe, Middle East, Asia, even Africa, in these would likely interpret the terms Gulf of America and Gulf states based on how naming disputes usually work and how geographic names are understood internationally. The Gulf of America. International understandings. Most of the work continues to call the body of water the Gulf of Mexico. The name recognized for centuries by international bodies in most countries. That's because names of major geographic features are usually agreed upon by global organizations like the International Hydrographic Organization, not single governments. Eastern Hemisphere interpretation might be Gulf of America is a U.S. specific label, a domestic political naming choice, not a widely accepted global geographic name. Outside the United States, most maps and references would still call the Gulf of Mexico because that's a traditional, internationally recognized term. Some people might see Gulf of America as a political statement, a U.S. attempt to reframe geography for national pride and influence. And I just said this, guys. We weren't even on that side of the screen. I just scrolled up and saw this. It says, so in most of Asia, Africa, and Europe, I said this. If someone hears Gulf of America, they likely think a domestic U.S. name, political branding, not geographic consensus, and attempt to rewrite or reframe a well-known historic name. Here's the problem. Gulf states. This term is usually not related to United States context at all. In global geopolitical usage in the Middle East, Gulf states almost universally refers to the countries bordering the Persian Gulf, like Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Kuwait, the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, and Oman. This is a well-established regional term in diplomacy and global news. So when you say the Gulf states, are you trying to insinuate that you're going to have something called the Gulf of America? Or you're talking about the Persian Gulf, and all those countries? Are you calling those the Gulf of America? Are you trying to declare something against us? And that is definitely a threat. But we believe that we're the powerful ones. Screw what everyone else thinks about their cultures and everything. So let's think about it. And you'll think, well, that's not really a problem if you're American and you live in America. Yeah, but when you say that on the global stage, when a lot of people are starting to say it, they're starting to spread propaganda in a way that they don't know is propaganda, but now those people are seen as threats to foreign nations. It's just something that happens. You're creating a situation that you might not be aware that you're creating by saying these things. And it happens in different countries. You know, people can say things that they're not supposed to say, and that's how they get invaded. That's how countries get hurt. That's how people get hurt because of shit like this. So someone in the Eastern Hemisphere, especially in Asia, Africa, or the Middle East, would interpret Gulf states as Middle Eastern Gulf countries, not something connected to the Americas. While that interpretation exists, the term is rarely used in diplomacy, economics, and media to refer to Persian Gulf nations, often as GCC, Gulf Cooperation Council countries. The American context of a renamed Gulf of Mexico doesn't change that long-standing usage, even though we might think it does. Summary of likely external interpretations. Gulf of America, seen primarily as a U.S. political domestic name change, not widely accepted internationally. Most global media and maps would still use Gulf of Mexico. Gulf states, most commonly understood outside the United States as Middle Eastern Persian Gulf countries, not associated with the Americas in global discourse. But that doesn't mean they can't be interpreted like that. Why this matters, naming conventions are anchored in historical, navigational, and diplomatic consensus. And if you're a president of the world and you don't know this, I want to see how Trump wouldn't know this. I mean, Gulf states, that's been a thing since, you had the Gulf War. I don't think that's the same thing. Let me Google that. I think it was a different part of the world. No, it's right. It was, the Gulf War was a war waged by coalition forces from 35 nations led by the United States against Iraq in response to Iraq's invasion and annexation of Kuwait. So it was us waging a war led by the United States against Iraq. Well, that didn't help our cause at all. The Gulf War, the Gulf States, the Gulf of Mexico, renaming the Gulf of Mexico, the Gulf of America. Are you talking about the Persian Gulf? Are you talking about invading our country again? And Trump doesn't know this. Either he's really stupid. He's an idiot. He's oblivious. He's doing it on purpose. Or, I don't understand. I don't get it with him. I honestly, I don't. I mean, this stuff, that was in 1990 when was that? I didn't really get a year on that. It was 1990 and another year. It was 1990 and 1991. August 2nd, 1992, February 28th, 1991. Oh, wait. On Wikipedia, it says it's a 42-country coalition. I was reading from Google AI, and it said 35. So yeah. I don't really see how this is good for us. It says not just one. Continue what I was reading from earlier. I'll just read the entire thing again. Naming conventions are anchored in historical, navigational, and diplomatic consensus, not just one government's decree. Even if a country decides to rename something internally, the rest of the world may continue using the established label, especially when it's tied to history, culture, and widely used maps. So, yeah, when you're speaking things like Gulf states, I'm sure that it was around on Facebook and social media where people said, the Gulf states, the Gulf of America, and all this, not knowing what they're actually saying. And if you spread that out, if you told that to the wrong person, you'd get us all in trouble. Of course, Trump, you have to know how to speak on neutrality and how to speak in a way that everyone can understand what you're saying without what might look domestically nationalistic to you might be internationally nationalistic to someone else. Like you're trying to declare war on somebody. When you're trying to do something domestically, it can be interpreted by someone else. And of course you need to verify those things. But again, in the state of the world we are in right now, I would say do not trust. Do not trust that there isn't something that could happen. And they would already know that. So I'm not saying anything new or anything that gets me in trouble. I'm just saying, be aware of, especially if you're a president, be aware of the outside world. But that's, we think of ourselves so highly and arrogantly that we control the world, we control economics, that we can say anything we want and not get in trouble for it. Eventually, reality is going to hit us. Eventually. And I already know it's going to happen. I already know how it's going to happen. I know what day it's going to happen. And it's going to be the entire world against the United States. And really, could you blame them? I'd imagine there's be very little people who would support the United States when that time comes. Because you have to be some brainwashed, nationalist, patriot thing. Not necessarily a Trump supporter or conservative, but just a person who is oblivious to the outside world. Where you don't know these things. And there's this kind of a shame to it because conservatives are so against colleges and saying they're liberal and all this. But if they actually, there was some stuff in there that's really, really good to have. Like knowing about foreign countries, knowing symbolism, knowing different cultures. But this American thing that has come around, we're just setting us ourselves up for failure, and we think we're going to get away with it. There are people who think that we're going to get away with that. You think that we're going to get away with that? Be honest. Do you really think we're going to get away with that? Whether it's sabotage, it doesn't have to be military. It can be sabotage. It can be, videos like me where I can talk about these things. Do you really think that eventually America is going to be able to protect itself in the long term by doing stuff like this? If you think it can, you're either oblivious or you're stupid. I mean, there's no other way I can say it. But either way, I'm surprised this video is under 40 minutes. I feel like I've been talking for like an hour at least about this. But anyways, I know I got off track. I know that I've talked about a lot of things right here and diversified a bit. But, I think it's information that people should know about, should be aware of. So that's why I made this video. I wanted to talk about the Middle East thing for a while now. It was in my list of videos to do, but I remembered because I figured, when am I going to ever need to talk about this? Or, well, not need. It should be talked about, but I was like, when will the timing come up where I will actually be able to do that? So I just threw it out here, and so I don't have much to. I don't think I have anything else to say, but I'll end it here, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye for now.